Welcome back to Cheap Pops Radio. We've got a very special guest, Mr. Bill Brown. How are you, Mr. Bill Brown?
Doing very well, Thomas. Pleasure to be on your show.
Man, you are the voice of Houston baseball for my generation. I spent my youth as a child, and through my teens, growing up was, listen to Bill Brown, Jim DeShays and Milo Hamilton. It's such an honor to have you on Cheap Pops Radio.
Well, thank you. The honor's all mine, and it's really a blessing that we had an opportunity to do these jobs. JD and I had a 16-year run together, and it was all great. So there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and I loved that dynamic that you and Jim DeShays had, because you were always kind of the straight baseball guy. He'd give the stats, the batting averages, and Jim DeShays would throw in that comedy. Yep. And y'all had that great dynamic. I loved it.
Well, he is, as you know, and the people who are beneficiaries of his talent in Chicago now know, he's a great entertainer. And people would tell me, hey, I hope for a one-sided game because that's when he gets funny. Yeah, he has almost, it resembles a switch in his head that goes off when the game is getting boring, and he takes over as an entertainer at that point. And people love that. They really look forward to that.
Now, I know I want to backtrack a little bit because I know you had a career before the Astros. I know you worked with Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Reds. How did you get into baseball on the announcing side? How did that work for Bill Brown?
Well, I always wanted to do it, but it's difficult, as you know, and the most traveled route for broadcasters is to do minor league baseball and work their way up to the big leagues. I did not take that route because after college I got a job in TV rather than doing minor league ball. No, and those jobs, by the way, are difficult to get, even in Class A baseball. Those are difficult jobs to come by. And so I didn't even pursue it at that point. Then I got drafted into the Army. By the time I came out, just stayed in television and was lucky enough to be working at the TV station in Cincinnati that carried the Reds games. And the job came open a few times and I did not get it. And then finally I did get it. So I was fortunate to be working at that station at that time.
Right. And how was your time in Cincinnati? Is that where, you kind of built who Bill Brown was going to be before he came to Houston?
Well, it was a great learning experience for me because my wife and I moved there in 1972. They went to the World Series that year, lost Game 7. I was doing weekend sports at the station, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go down and do interviews quite a bit with the players. And then in 73 they made the playoffs. In 75 and 76 they won the World Series. So that was a great era of Reds baseball, and I started doing the TV games in 76. But prior to that, I filled in on a few games and did a pregame show. And I was there a lot at the stadium, and it was just a tremendous way to learn how the game is played, to watch really one of the great teams of all time play it at such a high level of excellence that it was a learning experience. And being around great minds like Sparky Anderson and the management people, it was a good way to learn the game.
Right. So from Cincinnati, you're in Cincinnati, and then also too, I think I read that you were one of the maybe the vice president or the director of sports for HSE.
Right, that's when HSE, remember when it started here in Houston, and it also started in Dallas, and that was the early 80s. Yeah, and then they wanted to start an additional HSE channel in Pittsburgh. So then I was hired to be a part of that startup operation, and unfortunately we didn't have the success that HSE had in Texas, and we were out of business after 1 year. That was a fun job while it lasted.
So was that failure? Is that failure how you kind of ended up in Houston?
It led to that because, as you know, in broadcasting, and we're always kind of scrambling for jobs.
Yes, sir.
It's never. It seems a feeling of, I'm going to be here for 20 years. No, it's not that at all. It's not that type of profession. You're always looking over your shoulder. You're always wondering what's around the next bridge, and hopefully it's not a train that hits you head on, but often it is. So yeah, then I was scrambling around for work, and I had this job in Cincinnati at another regional cable channel called Sports Time Cable Network, and I joined that outfit, and then that went out of business after a year. So at that point, nobody wanted to be around me because I was like a dark cloud walking into the room, you know. But then I went to LA and we did a show on Financial News Network. We did a sports talk show, which makes absolutely no sense at all. And fortunately, somehow that lasted 2 years until I came to Houston.
Right, which is where we all, you know, me and you, a lot of other fans, most of the city of Houston, we all fell in love with Bill Brown, because when you see Bill Brown on TV, like, he looks like the nice, honest guy that you see at like the grocery store, that you hold the door open, like you have that genuine kind of, you know, that look about you, like this is a good dude.
Well, thank you. And you know, your partners are a big part of everything with broadcasting, and Bill Worrell was here. He's been here forever, as you know. And,
yes, sir.
Worked with Bill quite a bit, and then when Jim Shays got into it, that was a great relationship. And as you say, you know, Milo was on radio the whole time, so it was a good group of people to be broadcasting Astros games. And you know, then Alan Ashby came in after Jim Shays, so I really have to credit all of my partners because, as you know, in TV more than in radio, the analyst is the guy. He is the person who makes things meaningful, who narrates the replays and tells you what to look for. He gives you the inside parts of the game that the play-by-play guy often does not do. And in radio, you know, play-by-play guy bears a lot more responsibility for describing the action, but in TV that's not necessary and it's not desirable. So the idea is to let the color man explain things and let him be expansive and give him the proper amount of time to express himself, and that's just the way it worked.
Right. And you know, I've got a lot of fond memories, like Saturdays and Sundays and like double headers of like listening to you guys. You should like talk about baseball. Like, what are some of your favorite moments? And I know you've probably got like tons of them. Like for me, like one of my favorite moments is, you know, that big home run Eric Anthony hit the Astrodome.
Right.
You know, I think it was maybe 500 feet, 525 feet, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I was there. Like, what are some of your favorite moments?
Well, I think those are always memorable. The long tape measure home runs. Bagwell hit some that you remember too. And those are things that stand out. And just, I think the excellent seasons of a Lance Berkman, you know, and the consistency that he had was a standout. And then, of course, anytime you have a no-hitter.
Right.
And, you know, I missed the Mike Scott no-hitter because that was the year before I came in '86, and I run in '87. But Scotty pitched a one-hitter and took, I think, one out in the ninth. He gave up the no-hit. He gave up his first hit with a no-hit bid that year in '87, or '88. But that was a thrill to be doing that game. And you know, we had a Mike Fiers no-hitter here in Minute Maid Park. So those are always games that are standouts. The Darryl Kyle no-hitter in the Dome was not a TV game, so I just did the middle 3 innings on radio. So you can't, you know, that was Milo's game. You can't claim that if you're doing 3 innings of a no-hitter.
Right?
Don't put it on the resume. Somebody will look it up and say you're a liar. I did 1/3 of a no-hitter.
You know,
and I think beyond that, I mean, the individual moments, the milestones of a Craig Biggio 3,000 hit are what really stand out. But also, in terms of the ball game, you know, and the Biggio 3,000 hit game was a great game. Carlos Lee won it with a grand slam. Just a great ball game. So it had everything. But I tend to gravitate toward those last game of the season, you know, 04 and 05 when they had to win, and 99. All 3 of those years they had to win the final day of the season to get into the playoffs. So those are great games to remember. And remember that we don't do the playoffs on TV, so we missed out on all the postseason stuff. So that's why I'm giving you the regular season games as the most memorable for me.
So, Brownie, this is Edson, Thomas's co-host, and hearing all these stories from you, I mean, it's amazing, the 30 years that you spent with the Astros. I was talking to Thomas off air earlier, and I was telling him how, as a fan, personally, it was disappointing to me that the World Championship, last year came after you had stepped aside from the booth. Now, this is where I get to ask you, obviously, they made you a part of it. But how did you feel about seeing those guys win just years after you stepped aside?
Well, people have asked me, why didn't you retire 15 years sooner so we could have enjoyed this a lot I get it.
No.
I know what I would have. I don't know what I would have done for money the rest of my life, but, some things you worry about later. But no, I just thought it was time. I thought that the team we had could well win a World Series, and I hoped it would. You just never know. But I was really happy just for the fans and for the franchise that we finally got this championship everybody had been waiting for so long. And so it really didn't matter. And, I would sit there and watch the World Series and think it would be great to be working this game, but I wouldn't have been working had I not retired, because the networks do all the postseason. And, I'm sure Todd Callis was thinking, boy, I'd love to be working this game too.
Yeah.
So it is somewhat frustrating in that sense to be doing games all season long and then be cut out of the postseason.
Okay, so it was great to get that insight from you. Now, the 3 decades the career here in Houston spanned, and obviously, we've had a lot of great teams come through here. I personally moved from California, but in 1996 to Houston, so I missed a lot of the earlier parts of your broadcasting days. But I come in when those guys, Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, are in the home run chase. Back in the late 90s. I get to go to the first ever World Series game here in Houston against the White Sox back in 05. By this point I'm already a diehard fan, and last year I get to see some of the viewing parties, because I didn't get to actually go to a game, and I got to see some of the viewing parties for the World Series. Now, you look at the 3 decades, and obviously I don't think you can pick out one favorite, but from the Killer Bees to the team now, the camaraderie. What would you say is one of the better teams that you've been a part of?
I always thought the '98 team was the best team I had been around, because the Killer Bees were so vibrant, and they just clubbed teams. With their hitting, they just they'd win games 8-2, and it kind of reminded me of the Big Red Machine days. That was the way they won games. But then and then they traded for Randy Johnson, and I thought, well, this has got to be the year. And he was absolutely phenomenal, but in the playoffs it didn't work out. But nonetheless, they won 102 games. That's the most of any Houston team. So I have to say, for the regular season, that's been, to me, the best team that I've been around here in Houston.
Not the 2013 Astros, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We had September 1st and flipped over to the calendar and we said, can we make this October 1st?
Yeah. Hey, but Jose was already on his way up, and better days were ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, but we all understood the process, and we knew that this was rock bottom and things were going to get better. We didn't know when. And you had, at that point, if you believed in what was happening, and there was a tiny core of Astros fans, and I say tiny because we had TV ratings of 0.0 in some of the games in September, so it was really tiny. You believed in what they were doing with the farm system, and that's the way it did turn out. Now, they developed this core, the Altuves and the Correas and so on down the line, and so this core really was what did it for them, and it did work by the book. Often it does not, as you know, when you're rebuilding a baseball team.
Well, when you say by the book, that brings back something that I read recently. There's a book out there called Astroball, and it refers to the way that the team is being built from the farm system up, and reminiscent of the Athletics and the way they did Moneyball. Of course, we've all seen the movie. My question to you is, do you think that the way that the Astros did it is similar to the way the A's did it, or are there some differences that you can point out to us?
I think there are differences because I think the Astros built more through the draft. A lot of the focus about Moneyball was about Scott Hatteberg being converted from a catcher to a first baseman, and they had Tejada. They had some really good players that had been with them for a while. But the other thing they had was Hudson and Zito and Mulder, and I didn't think they got any credit at all in Moneyball. And the team was built around those three stud starting pitchers. Getting the job done, and they were all fabulous that year. So I think, in the sense of maybe developing pitching, Oakland did that, but I think the Astros developed more of the entire team through the farm system, and Oakland was able to manipulate the roster a little bit, make some moves, and just kind of wait for everything to come together. But I thought the Astros, probably as much as any team, and then now they've become kind of the model, and the Cubs too, for a certain extent, for teams now that Baltimore and Miami will follow is go ahead and trade your veterans and build through the system, and if you do it as well as they did, it can work. But putting all your faith in a 22-year-old player, and he's in the minor leagues and maybe a double A by the time you decide you want to rebuild, that's a leap of faith too.
It really is.
And for the record, I think instead of calling it Astro Ball, we should have been more original. I think Astronomics would have been a better name, but that's just a personal thing.
And you bring up a point, because they did it a little different way. In a way, they followed the Cubs model, but in a way they didn't. And they were so bad. I mean, they were just awful in 2013.
Right.
That a lot of people thought, well, this isn't going to work. They might have a concept here, but it's just not going to work. And they tweaked some things with the defensive shifting and working with pitchers who had a lot of spin rate. They had some concepts that were pretty novel in the game, and they identified pitchers like Colin McHugh, who had that spin rate, and Ryan Presley this year, they singled him out for that same thing with the big curveball and the tight spin, and it worked. And Charlie Morton was another one. But that's also requiring players to be healthy, and that doesn't always work.
Right. Hey, I wanted to ask you too. There are some pivotal moments in Houston Astro history, and I kind of wanted to get your viewpoint on those moments. Let's start with the closing of the Astrodome.
I thought that the Astrodome was a great building. I'm one of those old school historian type guys who wanted it reserved, and I know that's in the minority, but it's going to be done now. And I just thought that it put Houston kind of on the world map, because I was told by people who were here at the time, like Mickey Herskowitz, who was a writer for the Post and the Chronicle for many years, that if you went to Europe and you said you were from Houston, they knew about the Astrodome. So this was a big deal worldwide. It was such an innovative building, and it really served as a model as far as AstroTurf for the other stadiums that came along afterward. But the baseball was small ball because the ball did not carry in the dome. And,
I remember.
Glenn Davis was one of the few legitimate power hitters. You mentioned Eric Anthony, but there would be a lot of would-be home run balls in other parks that would die on the morning track at the Astrodome. So it's just tough to have the kind of power that they had. Of course, Dow Bagwell also, I think the Astrodome probably cost him, I'd say conservatively 60, 70 home runs in his career compared to if he had played his whole career at Minute Maid or Cincinnati or any number of other parks. But nonetheless, I liked the type of baseball. It was a lot of 3-2 games, pitching, defense, base running. These were all important ingredients. That's what I grew up with as a kid. The game has changed a lot now.
Right.
But at that time, I really liked that kind of ball. However, I thought it was really hard to get the fans into a game at the Astrodome. People would come in, it was 95 outside, it was 72 inside. They'd sink into those cushioned, comfortable seats, and it was like going into a movie theater in July. It was just hard to avoid taking a nap.
Right,
And,
you're right.
there wasn't a lot of energy in the stadium unless maybe if it's a playoff game there is, but or late season, regular season, but it just it didn't really energize people to be in the Astrodome. And I think Minute Maid is a much more vibrant park, and it's certainly better located too. So I was ready for a new ballpark, but yet I felt that the dome should have been used for a purpose, and it will be again when the repurposing is finished.
So now let's move on and let's talk about when the Astros went from the National League to the American League, because that's a pivotal moment in the history of the franchise. The National League was always more strategy based, pinch hitting for the pitcher, sacrifice bunts, squeeze plays. National League Baseball always had a little bit more strategy, whereas with the American League, you had that extra hitter. You had the DH. You didn't have to worry about the pitcher, who's almost, always seen as like an automatic out. In the organization, was that viewed as a good thing going to the American League? Or were there some people that were kind of, old school and wanted to kind of stay in the National League?
I would say they were completely forced into the American League. I think probably the organization preferred not to do it, but they had no choice because baseball made it clear. Major League Baseball said if you're going to buy the Astros, you're going to have to accept a move to the American League. There was no either or. There was no other team that was a candidate. I felt it was wrong. I felt it was completely unfair. I prefer National League Baseball, so that's behind that thought. But the other thing was, I just don't think it's right to force a team to move leagues. And yet, it's worked out, and you could say, perhaps, looking back on things, that the Astros may not have won a World Series had they remained in the National League. Now, we could debate that until the cows come home, but in effect, I think it has been beneficial for them to be placed in the American League West rather than stay in the National League Central. I understood that, baseball had to have 15 teams in each league, 5 teams in each division to balance things out. I thought there would have been another way they could go. They could have forced Arizona to move to the American League West. Arizona's a little west of Houston, but that's just not the way the people at the top of the food chain were thinking at the time, because Arizona didn't want to move and claimed that it had all this tradition. Well, yeah, since '93, that's a lot of tradition. But that's just the way it went, and we had no choice.
And the
I
thing,
didn't like it. I still don't like it, but that's bygone by now.
yeah, and the thing is, the National League Central Division, there was so much of like heated rivalries, the games with the Cubs, the games with the Cardinals. Like even in those seasons where you're rebuilding and where your team is not talent-wise up to par with a lot of the other teams. Anytime the Astros played St. Louis, it was a must-watch. The Astros were playing the Cubs. You got to watch it. You know what I mean? And I think when the Astros moved to the American League, you can say, well, there's the Texas Rangers there, and that's always fun. But just those rivalries that kind of got wiped out, or they're not there, or as prevalent as they used to be.
Right. And that's really my thought on it as well, is that when you force a team to move leagues, you just don't have the rivals that we had. And people got up for those games, They really looked forward to those teams you mentioned coming here. And I thought it was tremendous being in the National League Central. It was great. You could go on those road trips to St. Louis, Chicago, Milwaukee. And all those games were fun. They were well played. But moving to the American League, okay, we have no rivalry with the Yankees. We have no rivalry with the Red Sox, two of the traditional teams that people like to see here. Seattle, nothing there. Angels, no. Oakland, no. Texas, maybe. And the rivalry with Texas really didn't develop until the last couple of years when the Astros got good, because the Rangers just ran all over them the first few years that they made the move to the American League. But then, there were some dust-ups on the field, and I felt like this is what it's going to take to have a rivalry. First of all, both teams should be good because that's what we remember when we had those battles with the Cardinals. In 01, we went down to the last day of the season. We wound up with identical records. Those are the things that people remember about rivalries. And then maybe, there's a little fracas on the field. What's going to happen now the next time they play? We finally had a few of those with the Rangers, and then the Astros, of course, now have blown by the Rangers. But I don't think you can announce we have a rivalry with this team now. No, it takes years usually to develop those.
Right.
All right, Brody. So as we start to wrap this up, because first of all, it's your birthday, so I didn't get to tell you happy birthday, but it is an absolute honor that you did this on your birthday, sir. So obviously, we're not going to put you on the big spot. We're not going to have you rank, but I'm interested, and I'm sure the people are interested, since you came here in '86 up until now, even though you're not part of the booth anymore. Your top 3 favorite Astros players.
Oh, I have seen the whole careers of Biggio, Bagwell, and Berkman. I'm going to go with those 3 just off the top. There are many other guys that I really thought were tremendous players, but
That's a good enough list right there.
Yeah, it's a treasure to be a part of guys. Berkman, of course, played for other teams at the end, but nonetheless, he was here for a good long stay. And those guys have all been good friends. So and this is the beauty of being in baseball. You make so many friends, and you're able to. I've seen Chris Sampson at the ballpark. I saw Bill Dawley, who didn't play when I was announcing, but nonetheless, I've known him for a long time. And these are great friendships that it's fun to renew. Shane Reynolds, all these guys will drop in, and it's always a joy to see them. So, but I'd have to give you those 3 just off the top of my head.
I'm going to tell you, before we let you go, my favorite Bill Brown memory.
All right.
It was a game. It was the Astros and the Giants, San Francisco. And the Astros at that time had Mark Portugal. And, and we talk about, the National League being more strategy-based because the pitchers were almost always considered like an automatic out or a bunt, a sacrifice bunt. But in this game, Mark Portugal comes up to bat. I think he struck out the first time, and the second time he came up, he hit a home run. And when he hits the ball, Bill Brown, fly ball to right. And then it goes over, but when it goes over, it's a home run. Like when you called the home run, you almost kind of laughed. And I was like, oh my God, a pitcher just hit a home run. Mark Portugal hit a home run. And I think that was your feeling in your mind, like, oh my God.
Well, I'll tell you a quick Mark Portugal story. This is one of my favorites. Bob Cluck was our pitching coach at the time. We were in Cincinnati. Portugal gave up 3 consecutive home runs to the Reds. And it might have been about 5 pitches. It was really, really fast. So after the 3rd consecutive home run, Cluck ran out to the mound. And Portugal, of course, had smoke coming out of his ears by then. So he looked at Cluck and said, "What are you doing out here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm not out here for you. I'm just out here to give the cannon a chance to reload the fireworks."
That is hilarious.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for that story. Before we let you go, tell our fans where they can find you on social media, Twitter, IG.
Also, you have a book, so plug that as well.
Well, yeah, it was a pleasure to write a book last year about the season, and that's on Amazon, and it's Houston's team, Houston's title, and then there's a long subtitle. I won't bore you with that, but that's just it's a quick read about the season last year and the postseason and everything. But I'm at BrownieTW on Twitter. And I've got 2 different Facebook pages. One of is Bill Brown Journalist. That's the one if I'm out shooting photos at a game, I'll put my pictures on there and put a little cut line or maybe write a little paragraph about what's going on with the team, something like that. And so that's about it. But it's fun. It's still being a part of it and being out in the community. And it's just a real blessing to be here in Houston. I was at a meeting today, and we were talking about Hurricane Harvey a year ago, and people in the community still need a lot of help, so I think we need to be mindful of that and try to do what we can. The Astros are real good in the community. They get players out there and do things of a charity nature, and it's a very good organization to work for.
It's great to hear that you are living your life with a purpose, sir. I mean, look at that. On your birthday, you're doing meetings, you're doing Cheap Pops Radio. From me, Edson Baeza, it is an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and we can't wait to see what the future holds for you.
It really is. You know, you are the voice of baseball for me. Like, you know, my whole life. It's like Bill Brown, Jim DeShays, Milo Hamilton. You know what I mean? It's truly an humbling experience. Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, and thanks for the time. Best of luck in your careers. I enjoyed being on the show.
Thank you, Brownie. Thank you, Brownie.
Have a good night, guys.
You too, sir.